Okay, so we're on to lesson 6 in unit 1, and you'll notice that I made lesson 1.5 and one of those aspire to do lessons because I believe 1.5 is kind of above and beyond. It goes into some more depth. It is a very good thing to, look at least, and if you've got some time, I'd really encourage you guys to go through that lesson and kind of look at some of the problems and know that you can work through them, but it's mostly just some strategies for problem solving. So we're moving on to lesson 1.6. So I didn't skip lesson 5, but I just wanted to make that one kind of an above and beyond lesson. So this one too, another kind of review of Algebra 1, where we're solving linear inequalities. And this first video just covers just a refresher on how to graph them. So this is just some reminders on how you're supposed to graph an inequality, because inequalities are another thing that we don't always think about, but they are a pretty important aspect of Algebra 2. So reading in example 1, graphing some simple inequalities, A and B just represent two different ones. Two things we notice with A. I read that as x is less than or equal to 4. So I'm going to write out a couple things here. If you remember when we graphed in Algebra 1, we looked at this and said less than or equal to, we would shade to the left of our point. And talk about closed or open circle. Our solutions include 4, so our circle is going to be closed. And numbering these, I left them blank. I want you guys to be able to pick the numbers. If you don't want to number the whole thing, I'm really okay with that. As long as you have some numbers below 4, less than 4, some numbers greater than 4, I'm okay with it. So I'm going to number this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You get the picture, okay? So it's okay if you don't number the whole thing, all right? But I do want numbering to show me you know left and right, basically. So close circle at 4. And shading to the left, if you've got a highlighter, this would be a really great time to use that to shade. But if you want to just shade with your pen or pencil, that's fine. Don't go crazy. Just show me you know to the left, all right? And that one's done. So second one, x is greater than -2. Greater than, we're going to shade right. Still yellow, that's okay. We're going to shade right. And that's -2 is not included in our solutions. So that is going to be an open circle. So I'm going to graph just a few points, -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. I'd say that's good enough. At -2 is where I put my open circle. I want to make sure I show that it's open. It's not perfect, but it'll work. And then I'm going to shade to the right. So that means all of our solutions are numbers greater than -2. Greater than -2. So guided practice, a couple of simple ones, throw them at you, see if you can do them. I want you to pause the video and then check in with your answers and ask me for help if I'm available. So take a minute to pause. All right, guided practice number 1 here. X is less than or equal to -1. So that's going to be a closed circle at -1, and I'm going to shade to the left. So I'm just going to throw in a couple points here on my number line. That's probably good. Okay, got numbers greater and less than -1. Put my closed circle at -1, and I'm going to shade to the left. Less than to the left. Okay, so that one's finished. Moving on to number 2 here. X is greater than -3. So I'm going to go -4, -3, -2, -1. I'm going to graph an open circle at -3. As open as I can make it a little bit better. Open circle at -3. There we go. And then I'm going to shade to the right. Okay. The main thing I want you guys to understand here is when we're graphing these, you look at both of these. This does not mean that there are more solutions. No, you don't need to write this down, but there are not more solutions to the right than there are to the left just because this shaded part looks bigger. Think about it. There's an infinite amount of numbers greater than -3. there's an infinite amount of numbers less than -3. So there's no more solutions on one side than the other for these inequalities. We're just thinking numbers greater than -3. All right. So don't think about the equality of the solutions. All right. So moving ahead to example 2, I'll erase that. Moving ahead to example 2, graphing some compound inequalities. So you're going to hear me use the terms and or for these inequalities. In example 2, part A, this one is what we call an and inequality. And the way I read that is -3 is less than x and x is less than 1. Another way I can read it, x is greater than -3 and x is less than 1. So the way I read this inequality, the way I read it mathematically, is I'm saying that my solutions are between the values -3 and +1. So I'm going to graph at least -3, +1, and all the numbers in all the digits or integers in between. So I'm going to graph, let's do this, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1. I can go beyond, okay, 2, 3. But since these are both less thans, since these are both not or equal to's, I'm going to put open circles at both 3 and at 1. So when we think about and inequalities, generally they're going to be where you shade in between the 2 points you graph, and that's going to be the case here. I'm going to shade in between -3 and +1. Okay, and that is graphed. So it's saying x is greater than -3 as long as it's still less than 1. So that's an and inequality. In the next example, this is an or inequality, and the dead giveaway there uses the word or. So graphing that, x is less than -1 or x is greater than +1. So I'm just going to first mark up my number line. Filled out the hole in there. And you got to be careful. X is less than -1, so the circle I put at -1 is going to be open. However, x is greater than or equal to 1, it's got to be a closed circle at +1. And with or inequalities, the main thing is read each inequality separately. X can be this or this. So it satisfies it's a little bit less restrictive than an and inequality. So to graph this, I'm going to shade to the left of -1. Find my color here. To the left of -1. And then to the right of +1. And that is graphed. So that's an or inequality. So usually and inequalities you shade in, or inequalities you shade out. So moving on to that last guided practice of this step, okay? This last guided practice. Pause, work through it, and then check in with your answers, check in on your answers with me. So this inequality is an or inequality. Less than or equal to 0, greater than 2. So for this inequality, your number line however you see fit, as long as you can graph both of your points. Close circle at 0, open at 2, shade to the left of 0, shade to the right of 2. And that one's graphed. So pretty straightforward stuff, a lot of review. Make sure that you are checking in with me periodically through these lessons to make sure that you're understanding what your steps are and if you're doing them right, so you can move on to that next step.